You're listening to the Friends Talking Nerdy Podcast Network.
Friends Talking Nerdy. If your friends are nerdy and you are nerdy too, I want to talk to you. Friends Talking Nerdy.
Feels good to be back.
Feels real good.
Damn right. This is Portland, Oregon, and live to tape, folks. This is Friends Talking Nerdy. Tim the Nerd coming at you for almost the 300th time. And right next to me here at the table, we have the greatest legal mind in the Pacific Northwest. We have Professor Aubrey.
Hello, everyone. I am just so glad to be back on the air with you. And I'm so glad you're back in Portland, Oregon, Tim.
Indeed. I'm definitely glad to be back. It's like I said before, absence makes the heart grow fonder, and being away made me realize what I missed.
That's why I like traveling so much, is because I think the same thing happens in many, where you go somewhere and it's like so great, but you still want to go home.
Also, too, I mean, if you think about it, it's like the people that, see the same thing every day. It's like somebody that works at Disneyland is going to be bored of Disneyland because that's their job. But someone who, is brought there for the first time as a kid, and maybe that's the only time they ever go there, it's the greatest place in the fucking world.
Right.
But what has your week been like?
Well, it's been kind of a wacky week. I started out on Monday. So a good friend of mine's father had a heart attack recently.
I'm sorry to hear that.
And so I've been helping out, like with doctor's appointments and that sort of thing with him. And then I myself had oral surgery on yesterday. And so I've been feeling... Yesterday I took pain meds all day, but today I don't really need the pain meds. It's just kind of an ache, but it makes me really tired. Like I was really tired today and slept a lot of the day. And they say it takes 24 to 48 hours to recover from that. So I feel okay about the fact that I slept a lot today.
Yeah, and those pain medications are physical depressants too. So, I can certainly understand why you would be tired.
Yeah. So that's how my week's been.
Mm-hmm. Me, I traveled across the country.
In an airplane.
Indeed. Like I said on the latest episode of Tim's Tremendous Tapes, which is out now exclusively on Spotify, I am all about experiences. And when it came to the experience of taking Amtrak across the country, there were a lot of great, visual sights that I saw that I probably would never have seen before and will probably never see again. So I don't regret the experience at all. Yet I would never do that experience again unless I had the money for one of those cabins that had a bed.
Yeah, a sleeper car.
Yeah,
which comes with all meals in the dining car.
Yeah, which, with my tax bracket the way it is, probably not going to happen.
Yeah, I decided that a long time ago. That was something I really wanted to do, and I was like, but I could take that $2,000 and do something else with it.
Yeah, because that's a thing. I mean, for the cost of traveling in style, especially when you're tall and gigantic like I am, it's cost prohibitive. You really can. And so, yeah, it made more sense to fly this time. I went to Logan Airport, where 9/11 started. And I even took a United flight, so that was like, oh my goodness,
Lightning never strikes twice, though, darling.
It did that day. Anyway, too soon.
Too soon.
But anyway, the flight though was fine. Thanks to technology being the way it is. I mean, I hadn't flown since my mother passed away in 2011, and being able to access internet in an airplane was pretty awesome.
Yeah. It makes it a much better trip than just not being able to communicate with the outside world, especially if you're on like a 13-hour flight.
Yeah, and it was, yeah, I mean, I like the fact that at bare minimum they offer free access to your like iMessage and iPhone. I guess there's a way based on science that they can determine if you're using that and not like just Instagram. But even the price for the internet, which I paid for the flight to Denver, was for their Mileage Plus members, which they encourage you to sign up for if you download their app, and it's free to sign up for. It was just $8. So,
Yeah, that's not bad for entertainment on a plane.
yeah, most of the time though, I did end up writing. My youngest Lucy kind of has encouraged me to get out of my creative funk, and encouraged me to be a little more proactive in creating my work of art. That is a trashy action novel. So I definitely had. Some fun times in plane writing. I got about 4,000 words in.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's a lot for a plane ride.
Yeah, and I mean, that shows you how long the flight was. But it was nice because I was following along with the notes that I made because I found out when TV, for instance, they do what's called a beat sheet first in the screenwriting process, and the beat sheet is essentially a summary of each scene that they want in the episode, and then that beat sheet is given to the writer who writes it up, and that actually makes for a much faster writing process. If, unlike me, you do it every single day, because essentially the way I see it, like my notes that I have is essentially just a summary first draft. Why go to the effort of making a complete first draft if that's just going to be essentially re-edited anyway,
Well, and to me, I always say you cannot write about something until you know what you want to say. And when you don't outline or do a beat sheet before you're writing creative fiction, I think you can tend to ramble and you can tend to try to think of the next thing that's going to happen without seeing the full picture of what the book is overall, the arc of the book, don't you find?
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't mean that there aren't authors out there who aren't successful at it. I mean, Stephen King is not a note taker. He goes by the seat of his pants. They call them pantsers in the writing community, just in terms of creating that. But, I found, too, that doing that takes practice. Just like, you with your guitar and all that, it takes daily practice to get into that mindset of I'm going to create. And he doesn't set himself any unrealistic goals because if you think about it, I believe on average, 1,000 words is roughly 3 pages. And that's generally what I understand he shoots for each day. Because if you do that every single day, within no time, you're going to have a book.
Yeah. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we can't all be Stephen King.
Well, that works for him, though. Now, I've for most of my life, in terms of my writing, I was a pantser, and what I found is by going by the outline, I've changed a lot from that outline to what I have so far in essentially the second draft, But that doesn't mean the outline hasn't been a help because again, I know the beginning of the scene and I know the end of the scene. It's just a matter of fleshing it out.
Right. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense to take it scene by scene as opposed to, trying to tell the story in some other way.
Yeah. Yeah, but anyway, that is the fun I had on the plane, and, we ended up meeting at the tarmac and all that stuff. It was great, and I am just so glad to be back home.
Well, I'm so glad to have you back home here in Portland and be able to record again on Friends.
What's the name of the show again?
I couldn't remember which show we were on.
Huh? What?
We've got so many shows in the Friends Talking Nerdy Podcast Network.
Yeah. Yeah, this is Friends Talking Something. Friends Talking Nerdy.
Friends Talking Nerdy.
Yes. Anyway, as we mentioned at the end of last week's episode, we have an interesting topic here this week. This week, we're going to be talking about decriminalizing sex work.
Yes, we are. And probably the first thing we need to do is establish what sex work is. And sex work has expanded with technology to include lots of things with no physical contact. So webcam girls or webcam boys or webcam non-binary people make money.
God bless you all. No.
By having members who watch their...
I'm kidding.
Not that kind of member. They have human members who... Oh, God.
Play with their members.
Excuse me. So there's that kind of sex work. There is dancing, erotic dancing, which to me is sex work. There's burlesque performance, which is sex work. There is traditional, what you think of when you think of sex work, which is, a John and a
prostitute.
Other kinds of sex work that you're aware of.
Pornography.
There's fetish work.
Pornography.
So being an actor in a...
We're going to put it on pause here, folks. I thought I heard a knock at the door. We'll be right back to give you the thrilling story. I'm so scared. Okay, and we're back. Apparently I was hearing something, so we do apologize for that. But, sex work, pornography.
Right, pornography. Fetish work, so...
A mistress, dominatrix.
Mm-hmm, or a dom, or master, I think both are available. The other thing that sex work can be good for is enhancing existing relationships. Mm-hmm. So if there are two people in a relationship and they desire to have a third person, maybe not in their relationship, but involved with them in some way, some sexual way, mm-hmm. that is sometimes best done with the sex worker because it creates comfort for everyone. It also doesn't kind of use somebody else to fulfill your fantasies in your other relationship, which to me is unethical. So they call it unicorn hunting.
Yeah. I mean, there are plenty of people who think they can find themselves some unicorns in dating apps.
Yep, plenty of people. And that just doesn't really happen that much, I don't think. So if that's something people are really interested in, an option is hiring a sex worker. And wouldn't it be nice if you were hiring a sex worker for whatever reason to have sex with, presumably, that person is still a human being and is still working. They're trading their time for money. And so that's really what I see sex work as.
Yeah, I mean, it's a job that's not for everybody, but, I think the fact that it's been around in one way, shape, or form for centuries, shows that it is an important and vital part of, everyday life. We're all sexual beings. And I think the idea here is not to try and convince people that, that they themselves are not comfortable going to a prostitute or anything like that. We're not going to convince you against your beliefs because you are entitled to your beliefs, even if I disagree with you. But what we're talking about here is the benefits of overall society if we do decriminalize it, and, the benefits of why that is important, especially with, some of the reasons why. I mean, because we have, at the end of the day, we're talking about two people, sometimes more if the money's right, that get together by their own consent. Money changes hands, yes, but it is something that is mutually agreed upon both parties, and even at the end of the day, if you are married in a monogamous relationship and you found out your partner went to a prostitute, they broke that monogamous relationship and you have a right to be pissed at them, but at least one thing you wouldn't have to worry about if it was decriminalized would be, is that person have a disease? Because in terms of prostitution, there is, depending on where you're at in the country, the chance that could be the case. And, and we're going to talk about it here in our notes. But, a lot of times they can't get the health care. They just,
Right, or
you know.
they don't have access to it for some reason, and we'll talk about that.
Indeed, but what we've done is we found a nice article called It's Time to Decriminalize Sex Work that was on the ACLU website, the American Civil Liberties Union, which was co-founded, as the Reverend found out today, by Helen Keller.
I did just find out that today. You taught me that. I had no idea.
Yeah, the more you know. But they are an important legal organization in this country, in my opinion, that, will fight for people's rights, whether it's a right that people in society generally will agree with or not. I mean, because, I'll take a benign case because I could use something like the KKK, but Jehovah's Witnesses. Mm-hmm. They had to fight for the conscientious objector status.
Right.
In the past, in World War II and before, they were put in prison, and sometimes worse things happened to them. But thanks to the help of organizations like the ACLU, they fought for that status, and that status ended up not only helping Jehovah's Witnesses, but anybody that was a conscientious objector that wanted to sign up for that.
Right. Yeah. That is very important, of course, for groups to be able to express their closely and genuinely held beliefs and not be ordered by the government to do things that are against their beliefs.
Indeed. And again, that shows to me the importance of why the ACLU is important, because, even if it is, a group like the KKK, at the end of the day, as long as no violence is being done, physical violence, people being harmed, property being harmed, or anything like that, this is still America. They do have a right to congregate and, have their rallies and whatnot. Now, granted, hopefully, I think more and more people tend to, counter-protest when they do stuff like that. But, you can't take away people's rights just because you disagree with them.
No, or just because they're inconvenient.
Yeah. We probably lost half our audience so far.
I think we have a good liberal audience here.
All I care for is open-minded, because I do think, I don't believe in absolutes. I think that there are conservative people out there that, are upstanding citizens and don't fall for some of the BS you see some conservatives do on the news. But anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're going to go through the bullet points here, paragraph by paragraph, and go from there. And like we normally do, we'll read the bullet point and then give our thoughts and then start a conversation. Are we down with that?
Yeah.
All right. I will start off with number 1.
Okay.
All right. What does decriminalization mean? Decriminalization refers to the removal of criminal penalties for the buying and selling of sexual acts, specifically those categorized as prostitution. Decriminalization is not the same as legalization. Legalization removes criminal penalties for certain incidents of buying and selling of sexual acts, i.e. prostitution, provided the participants comply with relevant regulations. Decriminalization refers to the removal of criminal penalties for the buying and selling of sexual acts, specifically those categorized as prostitution. Decriminalization is not the same as legalization. Legalization removes criminal penalties for certain incidents of buying and selling of sexual acts, i.e. prostitution, provided the participants comply with relevant regulations.
Okay. So we see there's a difference between decriminalization and legalization. And most sex workers I know are very adamant that decriminalization rather than legalization is appropriate. Because when the state starts regulating things, it can get difficult to comply with those regulations. And so that work becomes, that work is the most accessible work there is. Mm-hmm. So it takes that accessible work and makes it inaccessible.
Well, think too, we're one of the states that, has legalized marijuana. And, there are a number of times to where you will come across stories, about weed shops in Oregon somewhere that were raided for whatever reason. That doesn't mean that the raid wasn't legit. I'm not trying to claim that, but if it were decriminalized and just had the standard, like basic regulations, like, you can't be under 21 to purchase it, blah, 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 then like cigarettes or alcohol, then there would be a lot less scrutiny on the individuals of that particular location selling the item, unless, again, they were flagrantly breaking, some of the basic rules.
Yeah. And I think, there are tons of reasons that decriminalization makes sense. Mm-hmm. The first of which is that decriminalizing sex work protects Black trans lives. So why do we say that? Well, at least 37 trans people were murdered this year. This article was written on January 2022. So this year, meaning the entire year of 2021, there were 37 trans people murdered for being who they are. Most were trans women of color, and many were sex workers. Former sex worker and activist Kanya Walker shares how her experience as a trans woman of color made her an advocate for decriminalization.
And you can go to the ACLU article, which you can find the link for in our show description here, to find out what she has to say further. Again, we went for mainly bullet points here, but go on.
Okay, so one of the things that decriminalization will do is to reduce police violence.
But we'll go on that in a minute.
You want me to talk about that?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So, why are trans people being murdered at a higher rate than cis people?
Well, I think one thing is when you have a major political party specifically calling them out, calling them groomers, and basically using the bully pulpit that they have access to thanks to the media to demonize them, and you have people that are scared of new, maybe they don't necessarily know that they know any trans people in their life, especially, I'm not knocking rural areas, but I bring that up as an example because with a lot less people living in your area, there's a chance you may not run across a trans person. That is just a fact. And, not knowing things can be scary to people.
Yeah, absolutely. And, trans people are at higher risk when trying to access healthcare because they may fear how they'll be treated. They don't get the medical care that they need when they seek it. And so there's generally a hostile relationship between authorities, including the medical community, and trans people because those systems are kind of set up to oppress trans people. They're the old systems that we've had in place, right? And so many trans people would choose not to engage in that system because of the way it treats them.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll definitely go into that later as well, but to your point about power, I mean, I think a lot of this, does boil down to the politics of it, because, the easiest way for a DA and a police chief to, look tough on crime is to have the numbers to prove it, even though we find out a lot of times that, and I'm not saying every single police officer is guilty of this, but you have plenty that will fake evidence, write incorrect reports intentionally, stuff like that. You have DAs that, will intentionally, break rules or whatever to be able to get the case presented as they want it to.
And in many district attorneys' offices, there's what's called the vice department, and they deal with drugs, alcohol, and prostitution. And so the existence of this special unit, right, the vice unit, demonstrates the kind of resources that go into maintaining we all know that prostitution is happening right now all over the place. So it's not preventing prostitution. It is just punishing people for engaging in that.
It really is. It really is. But let's go on to the next one because this is, that point that you just made. We're definitely going to bring that up again as we go along. But yeah, as you said, reduce police violence. It's one thing, decriminalizing, sex work can help with. Police abuse against sex workers is common, but police rarely face consequences for it. That's partly because sex workers fear being arrested if they come forward to report abuse. Police also take advantage of criminalization by extorting sex workers or coercing them into sexual acts, threatening arrest if they don't comply. Criminalizing sex work only helps police abuse their power and get away with it. Decriminalizing sex work would remove the fear of arrest that too often prevents sex workers from seeking justice. And point well taken. I mean, that is a fact. If going to the police to report something that was done to you is going to lead to them not going after the person that hurt you, but hurt you themselves, I can certainly understand why sex workers would not want to go to a cop. And if we decriminalize it as the point set in here, the police are not going to have that power. They're not going to have that, manipulation power to get away with what they did. I think too, when it comes to this, there does need to be talk, because a lot of this too boils down to the fact that, I think it was Jim Garrison, the DA in Louisiana, who was the guy who prosecuted the only person ever brought to court for the assassination of JFK. He talked about how ridiculous it was that, prostitutes are not listened to because the only reason people don't listen to them is that they're prostitutes.
Right.
Which that doesn't mean, just because they're a prostitute, that doesn't mean they're not telling the truth about what happened. And yeah, why should they be punished if one of the officers are breaking the law? I mean, that doesn't shield them from, the crime that they did against this person, just because that person has a profession that society has deemed needs to be criminalized. Mm-hmm. Anyway, and speaking of that, we have...
One of the things that we want to do with decriminalization is to deter violent clients. So, like the police, sex workers' clients can also take advantage of a criminalized environment because they know sex workers risk arrest if they report abuse. Clients know that they can rob, assault, or even murder a sex worker and get away with it because sex workers cannot rely upon protections of the law. Sex workers became even more vulnerable to abuse from clients after the passage of 2 bills in 2018. And we'll talk about those in a couple minutes. But just we've kind of covered it. Like, the police are not there to protect sex workers.
Yeah.
And so there are 2 new laws that were passed, the Stop Enabling Sex Traffickers Act and the Fight Online Sex Trafficking Act. So these are known as SESTA and FOSTA. And SESTA and FOSTA banned many online platforms for sex workers, including client screening services like Redbook, which allowed sex workers to share information about abusive and dangerous customers and build communities to protect themselves. The law also pushed more sex workers offline and into the streets, where they have to work in isolated areas to avoid arrest and deal with clients without background checks. The ACLU opposed SESTA FOSTA for violating sex workers' rights and restricting freedom of speech on the internet. In 2019, Congress introduced the Safe Sex Workers Study Act, which would allow further study on the impact of SESTA and FOSTA on sex workers' safety.
Yeah, and I think one thing they didn't even go into that much was the fact that the SESTA-FOSTA acts ended up, having some repercussions for the sex workers themselves, because they sort of mentioned it, but, the fact that they could go online and go to certain websites to advertise their services, they didn't need a pimp.
Nope.
No, they were able to be in a lot more control of the situation in terms of, having the money exchanged and everything like that. And also, too, being online and talking to the person, they'd be able to have a little more to vet to see if this was a safe situation and also control where it was going to be. So having these laws put into place prevents that from happening. Now, that is not to say that these acts don't have positive benefits. I'm not implying that. I haven't done enough research, on that part of it. And, just because blah, 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 you get my point. Anyway,
Yeah.
It's just that, think of the children laws tend to hurt the people that need the protection the most.
Right. It's not children that need protection from prostitutes.
Yeah, indeed. So how about I go to the next topic here?
Sounds great.
All right, the next bullet point here is provide access to healthcare. Sex workers often cannot access healthcare because they risk being arrested if it is revealed that they are a sex worker. Many also forego healthcare out of fear of mistreatment and discrimination by medical staff. Criminal law enforcement of sex work comes with unjust police practices like the use of condoms as evidence of intent to do sex work. As a result, some sex workers and people who are profiled as sex workers may opt not to carry condoms due to the risk of arrest. This puts them at higher risk of contracting HIV and other sexually transmitted diseases. Decriminalizing sex work would allow sex workers to get the care they need when they need it. And I kind of touched upon that point earlier. Like, if you are a person that is morally opposed against sex work and you have someone you're in a monogamous relationship with goes to see a prostitute, at the very least, wouldn't you want to know that one thing you didn't have to worry about was getting a disease?
Yeah, of course. Of course, that's what you would want. And you want people to be able to access the healthcare they need. Because they're extremely at risk. And we bear the cost, society bears the cost of that. So if we consider, a environment in which sex workers felt free to take their money that they've earned and go to the doctor and get treatment, if they felt comfortable doing that, it would help a lot.
Because, too, there are, like nurses, for example, that will look down on a client or something like that, or even, call the police if they suspect that, a person is a sex worker or something like that. You have doctors that would, easily do the same thing. Now, and maybe sometimes it could be argued that they're doing that to protect themselves because of the current environment we're in, but maybe not too. Why not give the medical professionals, the cover, I guess, to be able to just treat them because they need to be treated.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, let's move on to the next topic, which is to advance LGBTQ equality. So members of the LGBTQ community make up a large portion of sex workers and face disparate impacts in criminalized settings. Anti-sex work laws further marginalize members of the community by dramatically decreasing incomes and allowing for discrimination. Trans women of color are the most impacted by criminalization because police often profile them as sex workers and subject them to harassment. If sex work were decriminalized, police would have one less tool to harass and marginalize members of the LGBTQ community. Sex workers, and especially trans women, would have more agency when it comes to their own bodies and livelihoods. Decriminalizing sex work would promote the message that Black trans lives matter. Yeah, so absolutely. I think that, trans women of color bear a disproportionate share of the bad things that happen to sex workers, including violence, including incarceration. And if we protect the most vulnerable, we will automatically protect everybody else.
Indeed. Because justice is not distributed equitably at all. There was a link that will be in the show profile here to an NBC News story about the owner of the New England Patriots, Robert Kraft, who was arrested as part of an undercover sting on human trafficking for a massage parlor in Florida, where apparently he was getting hand jobs. And Robert Kraft ended up, getting the charges dropped. And, the reason I bring that up is justice is not equitable. If that were Tim Jousma, and Tim Jousma has never done anything like that and would never do anything like that unless it's legal, folks. But if it were a person in my tax bracket, that's not happening. person in my tax bracket without having the financial ability to pay off a lawyer that would have the time and resources to fight something like this, they're going to be in jail. Or, if it's like a first time, maybe they'll have a couple years probation or something like that. But still, having a criminal record is not the best thing for you, even if it ends up being just a misdemeanor,
Right. Yeah. Certainly, and that comes down to the availability of criminal record expungements. And in Oregon, we have a really great system of expungements. But I think in many other states, those aren't available or it's very hard to get them.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. All right, we will go on to the next bullet point here, and that's fight mass incarceration. The criminalization of sex work feeds the mass incarceration system by putting more people in jail unnecessarily. Those incarcerated for sex work tend to be trans and or people of color, two groups that are already disproportionately ensnared in our jail and prison systems. 1 in 6 trans people have been incarcerated, and 1 in 2 trans people of color. Incarcerated trans people are often aggressively misgendered, denied health care, punished for expressing their gender identity, and targeted for sexual violence. An arrest on charges of sex work can prevent someone from accessing an accurate ID, jobs, housing, healthcare, and other services. It can also lead to deportation for immigrants. Members of the trans community and sex workers already face discrimination in many of these systems, and a criminal record further marginalizes and stigmatizes being trans or engaging in sex work. And again, it's, like I had mentioned, if you're a rich person, you have access to lawyers that can get you out of a situation like this easily. If you're of my tax bracket, that's a different story. And if what this shows is a disproportionate enforcement of the law. And
selective enforcement, right? Where certain people are selected to be enforced against by those who do the enforcement because of characteristics other than the fact that they may have done a crime, right? So that these people who look a certain way, people who act a certain way, don't have money, don't have, a nice car, etc., like they're going to get the brunt of bad treatment by the police.
Yeah, and it would be one thing if the law was, enforced correctly from the top on down. That would still not make, making sex work illegal right, but at least you could say it was fair. But it is not fair, and that is not fair. And are we ever going to get to a system where it will ever be 100% fair? No, I'm not naive. We're humans. We're stupid in a lot of ways. But I think, we can and have on many issues over the years talked about the importance of, changing our minds. Look at prohibition. For at least a decade in this country, if not a little bit longer than that, it was illegal to buy alcohol. And you were arrested for buying alcohol. But we ended up realizing that that wasn't the right thing to do. Now, I don't know if people that were arrested for having it, if it was decriminalized or whatever, and they had their records expunged. I've not done enough research on that. But again, we've at plenty of times have determined that something is wrong, and maybe we had the wrong opinion, maybe it's right.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a social evolution. We should not cling. I believe that the Constitution is a living document, and so I don't think we should cling to what people 200 years ago or 250 years ago thought about these issues.
That is ridiculous. Because we've, and even though you'll have some people like your Second Amendment folks that, it must be interpreted as the way they interpreted it, that no, because I think even you will find in the writings of the Founding Fathers that they realized that time would make the laws evolve because, what was right for the 1700s is not right for, the 2020s.
Shouldn't be. Yeah, absolutely.
Let's hit our last point here.
Okay, our last point has to do with financial independence. And, this applies to marijuana operations as well, this inability to be financially independent. So, everyone deserves access to financial services, and everyone should be able to make a living and support themselves and their families. Okay, let's unpack that before we go on, because this isn't a commonly held belief in America, right? This idea that everyone deserves access to anything as capitalists, we say you deserve access if you could pay for it.
I remember at a church I used to go to, how I talked about how ridiculous it was that, like a poor person has to go with the dangers of going bankrupt for, cancer treatment or something like that. And that, it should be a given that if you have cancer, you're going to get the help. And I had a Christian look me in the face and say, well, how are doctors going to be paid? Fuck you. There's a reason I'm an atheist.
How are doctors going to be paid? They're going to be paid through taxes. Everything is going to be paid through taxes or through savings on other things we're not spending budget on.
Yeah, because in the countries where they do have, the socialized health, like England or whatnot, they may, they may pay more in taxes. But the cost savings down the road are far more because you're not having tons of people going bankrupt. You're not having them, potentially losing homes or, property or paychecks, part of their paychecks to, pay for obscene medical debts. It pays for itself in a lot of ways. It's just people in this country don't want to take a look at how it would benefit. They just see that, oh no, I would have to pay slightly more in a tax.
Or the government is encroaching on my personal decisions.
Did you see that TikTok video of it was a news report in like Northern California in the 80s when like Mothers Against Drunk Driving was just getting started, and they finally forced the police, because it was always illegal to drink and drive, but there was a point in this country to where if you got pulled over for drinking, the officer was just going to say, be careful driving home. And like they had a guy talking, they interviewed a guy who's like, I work 12 hours a day, and he'd talk like this, I'm not exaggerating. I work 12 hours a day, and I think it should be my right to drink a beer or two on the way home. And then another woman was like, what are they going to do next? I think this is communism.
How is it communism not to be able to have an open container and a machine that will kill people?
It's, yeah, you know that, I know that, but you have people that don't think about the effect on society. It's like, do I think that there are plenty of people today that still probably take a beer or two and drive when they necessarily shouldn't have, but do it successfully. But that doesn't mean you're going to be successful 100% of the time.
Right, and that's, a very good reason to stop drinking, or at least cut down on your drinking, is if you find yourself driving drunk once. I think that is too many times.
I mean, no. Don't get me wrong. I'm not encouraging people to do that.
Oh no, I know.
Yeah. It's just that I don't think it's an unrealistic expectation for there to be a rule stating that maybe you shouldn't do that, because again, we're talking just one too many drinks. Your driving abilities get hampered because of that, and you end up killing somebody.
Yeah.
I mean, because that's how I lost my grandfather.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was, and if fate had gone as planned, I would have been with him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, so that's good that you weren't.
Yeah, indeed. We wouldn't have this wonderful show, folks. But we have more.
Okay, we have more. So I've just said, people should be able to make a living and support themselves and their families. Yet companies like MasterCard and public platforms like PayPal and Venmo, which should offer their services to all users without discrimination, continue to boot sex workers and other users off their platforms with little due process. Bans on certain online content can also get adult websites shut down and cost sex workers their livelihoods. These practices amount to financial discrimination, which stigmatizes sex work and endangers the safety of sex workers by pushing the industry deeper into the shadows. And, I couldn't agree with that more. And I think we see the same thing with drug decriminalization. Things can be safer if we do harm reduction, which is not government regulation, but harm reduction, where the community actually goes out and helps sex workers in whatever way they need help, whether that's to have a safe place to work, whether that's to have supplies that they need, whether that's providing some sort of companionship, just for safety.
Yeah, I remember. Have you ever watched the Penn and Teller show Bullshit?
No.
Yes, it was a Showtime show, 8 or 9 seasons, but they did an episode on sex work. And, you know, I mean, there's, I believe, only 2 counties in Nevada that have it legalized in terms of allowing brothels. That, you know, are the only 2 counties in the United States overall, not just in Nevada, that, you know, have it legalized. And, you know, they, in that episode, compared the numbers and compared the situations of sex workers in that area compared to other parts of the country that don't have that protection. And, you know, the sex workers in Nevada they work at a safe place. They have security. They don't have a pimp. They have adequate health care. They have access to proper protection tools every day on the job, like condoms and all that stuff. It's much, much safer. And again, for all the people out there stating prostitution's wrong, going to sex workers wrong, that's fine for you. And if you want to not associate with people that, you know, think sex work is fine, again, fine. I'm not disagreeing with you folks out there. All I am saying is that, again, when we have a profession that has been around for centuries, it is not going away. And the lessons we can take from, you know, alcohol, the lessons we can take from, you know, cigarettes and whatnot is that, yeah, let's decriminalize it. Let's have some basic regulations because, yeah, I don't think, you know, a 14-year-old should be going to a sex worker. You know, you're not going to get an argument from me if you say you can only go to a sex worker if you're 21 or over. You know, but again, you know, again, if you're against sex work and against prostitutes, again, to use that example, at the very least, having proper regulation, have sex workers have access to health care and whatnot, is going to make sure that that's one less thing you have to worry about. You know, you can still get the divorce. By all means, go ahead and do that because blah, blah, blah. But it's just so much of an attack on people that don't have power. And that is generally what law enforcement will, for the most part, do to make it look like they're doing their jobs.
Exactly. To bump up those arrest numbers. The Vice Squad gets super excited when they arrest sex workers or drug dealers or, you know.
And that is another thing, too. I mean, now that we're talking about that, you know, there's one show that I really can't watch anymore because of this issue, and that's Law & Order, SVU. Because of the fact that, you know, that is essentially cop propaganda.
It really is.
And what do I mean by that? I mean, it's starting with Dragnet with Jack Webb, which started on radio and became the iconic TV show. It was common that he made a contract stating that, you know, basically when you hear about members of law enforcement being consulted on there, if law enforcement decides they're not comfortable with something, it's not going to be on that episode. And it can't be, you know, shows have to be presented in a certain way. And it's no mistake that anytime you have a cop show and you have the internal affairs people on the episode, the internal affairs are always bad. They're always the bad one.
Yeah.
In stories. And you know, that's been done on purpose. You know, I mean, the military does that. If you want to have any sort of military people in your movie, you're going to have the Army, the Navy, the Marines as consultants, quote unquote. And if you do something that goes against what they approve of, there goes the military.
Yep.
You know, so we're talking equitable usage of the law here. We are talking about giving a profession the rights that they deserve. We're talking about allowing men, women, trans people, everybody, every consenting adult that wants to be involved in sex work, whatever form that is, the freedom to do their job, the freedom to report people that hurt them while doing that job, and the freedom to get health care to protect themselves.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's what we're coming down to here on Friends Talking Nerdy, is that these changes, the decriminalization of sex work, would make it much safer, would make it more lucrative probably. You wouldn't get harassed or abused as much. And there's just absolutely nothing negative. There's no negative consequences, like zero.
Because again, If you are a person that is not supportive of sex work, then you're not going to a sex worker.
Right.
So what they do in the privacy of their own homes or a business or whatever is no concern of yours at all.
Right. So, I think most sex workers, one thing that they might want is the ability to associate with people they want to associate with, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because, making it so hard to be able to do the job, if you want to continue to do it, sometimes you're going to take money for something from somebody that you're not exactly comfortable with, as we talked about with the violence situation. So it's a lot to consider. And, like we said, the link to this article from the ACLU is going to be in our show description if you wanted to do a deeper dive in that. But sex workers, we support you here.
We absolutely do. We should declare this National Sex Work Day.
Damn right. And if you are going to a sex worker tonight, make sure you give them a tip.
Absolutely. Give them a big tip from us at Friends Talking Nerdy.
And if you do that, we'll send you a sticker.
Yes, we will.
I think that will wrap it up here for us this week, unless you have anything else you want to say.
Nope, I think that's it.
All right, we thank you all for listening. Remember on Thursdays on Spotify to check out the latest episode of Tim's Tremendous Tapes. We did have, because of the move situation with me, we didn't have a full episode like I contemplated we would. So the episode of The Blues will be next Thursday, but enjoy the little special brief episode the professor and I came out with. And then each Saturday in this podcast space, we'll have something to entertain your ear holes until we meet again. We bid you adieu.
Farewell.
What is the next line? Good, so long, farewell. I don't know. Sound of music.
Yeah, sound of music.
Anyway, my mother would be ashamed of me.
Subscribe to Friends Talking Nerdy on iTunes, the Google Play Music Store, as well as Spotify. Remember to support Friends Talking Nerdy on Patreon. Goodbye, darling.